How do you respond when you're facing a crisis in life? There are all kinds of crises. Sometimes they're painful. Sometimes they're costly. Sometimes they're very surprising. They come upon us. How do you respond? If you respond the right way, you can profit by it. If you respond the wrong way, then you find yourself paying a big price. We all are going to have crises in our life. In fact, how many of you have ever experienced a crisis in your life? Come on, put them up. Everybody has. I know they have. Well, how did you respond? You say, well, I didn't do very well. Or maybe you said, I responded right, maybe for the first time. Or the fact that I'm learning when crises come in our life. Well, the message today should be very, very encouraging because there is a proper way to respond. In fact, the truth is, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And oftentimes we miss what God is up to in our life because we don't think about a crisis, which may be painful or suffering loss or difficult and hardship. And it can be a crisis in your finances, in your relationships, in your health, in your vocation. It can be all kinds of things that bring crisis into our life. The issue is, how do we respond? And what's the basis of a right response? Well, in this passage of Scripture, the life of Joseph is a perfect example of the right kind of responses in time of crisis. And the fact, instead of focusing on the crisis itself, the issue is, what is my opportunity in the middle of this crisis? And today there are probably more people facing a crisis in our country than ever before in many, many years. So how do we face it? How do we respond to it? We could be angry and bitter and hostile. We could blame God or blame someone else. Is there a better way? Yes. Is there a way to profit in the midst of a painful crisis? Yes, there is. So I want you to turn, if you will, to the 37th chapter of the book of Genesis, because this is the beginning of the life of Joseph as recorded in the Scripture. And the truth is, not going to read much of this because if you read all of it, it would go all the way to the 50th chapter, because that last section of Genesis is all about the life of Joseph. There are not very many people in the Bible that nothing is said negative about them, but Joseph is certainly one of those leaders about which there's nothing negative said. And I just want to begin reading by a few verses in this 37th chapter. Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all the sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a varicolored coat, a tunic. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Now, I want to simply begin by saying, I want us to look at 7 major crises in Joseph's life. And then I want you to see how he responded and how each one of these crises prepared him for some area in his future life. Because God's still doing the same thing. When he allows a crisis in our life, he allows it for a purpose. And if we respond properly, then what I experience today in a crisis, if I respond correctly, will prepare me for another crisis that's coming along. And what happens is that each one builds upon the other. And the natural response ought to be that our faith should grow, our confidence in God should grow, and our confidence in ourselves as far as the way to respond. So as we look at these crises, I want to begin with the first one, which is the fact that he grew up in a family where in that 37th chapter, 3 times it says they hated him. They hated him. They hated him. He couldn't do anything right. He was always the subject of ridicule, of rejection. And so that was the kind of family he grew up in. Not just society, but that was his close, intimate family, absolutely hated by his brothers. Because they said, well, the father has been prejudiced toward him and made him this coat of many colors, as we would say. And so he'd had this dream, and this dream indicated that one day all of them would bow down to him. Well, there's enough turmoil in this family already and enough hatred, and then he says, one of these days, here's where it's going to be. All these sheaves, my sheaves in the middle, all these going to bow down, mine's going to stand up straight. Well, that just made them hate him that much more. So the issue is, how did he respond? How did he respond to living in a close family with 11 brothers and all of them hated him? Well, he could have said, it's your fault. He could have blamed them. He could have been resentful, hostile, angry, told his dad, and a whole lot of things he could have done. But here's what happened. He responded rightly, which means that he took the opportunity to learn how to live in that kind of a situation and circumstance where there was no love, no admiration, and no encouragement. He took the opportunity to learn how to respond to that and to respond to them without growing bitter, resentful, hostile, angry, and taking out vengeance upon them. No indication of that at all. Now, the important thing about that was this. That was very, very important to what was going to happen to him later on when he found himself in a situation where normally that's the kind of thing he would have felt. So his first crisis was just growing up in that kind of a family and learning how to respond to that situation. Well, the second crisis he faced was that his father sent him over to Shechem to check on the brothers and see how the flock was going and so forth. And so when they saw that he was coming, they just decided this is a good time to take care of him, so we'll just kill him. So they stripped him of his garments, and you remember they killed an animal and put the blood on the garment and took it back to the father and said, you know, poor Joseph, he's been killed by some animal and so forth. And so anyway, they threw him in a pit. They threw him in a pit to leave him there to die. And it was deep enough he couldn't get out. And so here he was, helpless and hopeless, leaving him to die. And what was his response? Well, naturally he wanted to get out, but he had to come to the conclusion that they weren't going to let him out. And so he had to take the opportunity. If he was going to survive this, how could there be an opportunity when he's in a pit and they're leaving him to die? But he had a dream. And that dream was that one day